If anti-Semitism were to gain a strong foothold in the United States, its impact would reach far beyond the Jewish community and begin to erode the very foundation of American identity. The United States has long presented itself as a nation grounded in ideals such as religious freedom, diversity, and equal protection under the law, principles that have attracted people from across the world seeking safety and opportunity. A rise in anti-Semitism would represent not just prejudice against one group, but a deeper fracture in these guiding values. It would signal that intolerance is no longer on the fringes of society but is becoming normalized in everyday life, public conversations, and even mainstream institutions. In such a climate, harmful stereotypes and conspiracy theories about Jewish people could circulate more openly, shaping perceptions in subtle and overt ways. Social media, political rhetoric, and cultural narratives might amplify these ideas, making them seem more acceptable or even legitimate to a wider audience. This normalization could lead to an increase in verbal harassment, workplace discrimination, vandalism of religious sites, and violent attacks. Jewish schools, synagogues, and community centers might need to operate under heightened security, changing the daily lives of individuals who would otherwise feel safe practicing their faith and expressing their identity. Fear and anxiety could become a constant presence, limiting people's sense of belonging and participation in society. At the same time, the broader social fabric would begin to weaken. When one form of hatred becomes tolerated, it often opens the door for others. Antisemitism rarely exists in isolation, it is frequently linked with xenophobia, racism, and other exclusionary ideologies. As these attitudes gain ground, trust between communities diminishes, and polarization deepens. Neighbors may grow suspicious of one another, and shared spaces, schools, workplaces, and civic institutions, could become sites of tension rather than cooperation. The sense of unity that is essential for a healthy democracy would begin to unravel, replaced by division and fear. Ultimately, the normalization of anti-Semitism would challenge the moral and ethical framework that underpins American society. It would force a reckoning with whether the country can truly uphold its stated commitment to equality and justice for all. If left unaddressed, such a shift would not only harm Jewish Americans but also set a dangerous precedent, suggesting that the rights and dignity of any group can be undermined. In this way, the consequences would extend far beyond a single community, threatening the stability and cohesion of the nation as a whole. On a political and institutional level, the entrenchment of anti-Semitism in the United States would have far-reaching and deeply troubling consequences for governance, policymaking, and the integrity of public institutions. Anti-Semitism is often intertwined with conspiracy-driven thinking, ideas that falsely portray Jewish individuals or communities as secretly controlling financial systems, media, or political power. If such narratives were to gain wider acceptance, they could distort how citizens interpret events and make decisions, replacing reasoned debate with suspicion and misinformation. This shift would weaken the quality of democratic discourse, as policies and public opinions might increasingly be shaped by fear and falsehoods rather than evidence and informed judgment. In the political arena, leaders and public officials would face a critical test, whether to challenge or exploit these sentiments. In a worst-case scenario, some politicians might choose to appeal to anti-Semitic biases for short-term political gain, using coded language or dog whistles to energize certain segments of the population. Others might remain silent, unwilling to confront prejudice due to fear of backlash or loss of support. This failure of leadership would send a dangerous message, that bigotry can exist without consequence in the public sphere. Over time, this could erode long-standing norms of accountability and ethical responsibility, allowing discrimination to seep into legislation, public policy, and administrative decisions. Institutions that are meant to serve as pillars of fairness and knowledge, such as universities, the media, and the judicial system, could also come under strain. Universities might see increased tensions on campuses, with Jewish students and faculty facing hostility or exclusion. Academic discussions could become polarized, with certain viewpoints suppressed or attacked not on intellectual grounds but due to prejudice. Similarly, Media organizations might struggle to maintain objectivity and credibility if anti-Semitic narratives begin influencing coverage or public trust. In the judicial system, even the perception of bias could undermine confidence in the rule of law, as people begin to question whether justice is truly impartial. As these institutional pressures mount, public trust, a cornerstone of any functioning democracy, would begin to decline. Citizens may grow cynical about the fairness of elections, the reliability of information, and the integrity of those in power. This erosion of trust can have a cascading effect, weakening civic engagement and increasing polarization. People may retreat into ideological echo chambers, further deepening divisions and making constructive dialogue more difficult. Ultimately, the spread of anti-Semitism at the political and institutional level would not only harm a specific community but would also destabilize the systems that uphold democracy itself, leaving the nation more vulnerable to broader forms of injustice and authoritarian tendencies. Globally, the rise of anti-Semitism within the United States would carry serious consequences that extend well beyond its borders, affecting international relations, global perceptions, and the broader fight for human rights. For decades, the U.S. has positioned itself as a leading advocate for tolerance, pluralism, and the protection of minority rights. While its record has not been perfect, it has often used its influence to call out discrimination and promote democratic values worldwide. If anti-Semitism were seen to be growing unchecked within the country, it would undermine this moral authority and weaken its ability to speak credibly on issues of justice and equality. Other nations might question whether the U.S. can genuinely uphold the principles it encourages others to follow. This perceived hypocrisy could be quickly seized upon by rival states and authoritarian regimes. Governments that already face criticism for human rights abuses might point to rising anti-Semitism in America as a way to deflect attention from their own actions, arguing that no country is in a position to judge others. Propaganda efforts could amplify incidents of hate or discrimination in the U.S., presenting them as evidence of systemic failure. In this way, anti-Semitism would not only harm those directly affected but also become a tool in global information wars, reshaping narratives about democracy and weakening the appeal of liberal values on the international stage. At the same time, extremist movements around the world could feel emboldened. When prejudice appears to gain ground in a country as influential as the United States, it can send a signal, intended or not, that such attitudes are becoming more acceptable. Far-right groups, conspiracy networks, and hate-based organizations in other regions might draw inspiration or validation, strengthening transnational connections and spreading harmful ideologies more rapidly. This could contribute to a broader rise in intolerance, not just against Jewish communities but against many minority groups, increasing the risk of social unrest and violence in multiple countries. Allies of the United States might also find themselves in a difficult position. Nations that share commitments to democratic ideals could feel pressure to respond, either by criticizing the U.S. or by reassessing aspects of their cooperation. Diplomatic relationships might become strained, particularly in forums focused on human rights and international law. Over time, this could weaken collective efforts to address global challenges that require trust and collaboration, such as conflict resolution, humanitarian aid, and the defense of civil liberties. Ultimately, the global impact of rising anti-Semitism in the United States would reflect a broader erosion of shared values that underpin international stability. It would demonstrate how deeply interconnected societies are, how internal divisions in one powerful nation can ripple outward, influencing perceptions, policies, and behaviors across the world. In this sense, the consequences would not remain confined within national borders but would contribute to a more divided and uncertain global landscape.